programme. How quickly do you think that is going to start feeding into the real economy?
Well, I know I'm in the minority of certainly about people that will speak publicly on this, but I think future historians will wince at what we're doing. I think fiscal and monetary policy are now wildly expansionary. I think deflation in the UK is largely a myth. CPI inflation is still well above the Bank of England's target. We've got all this monetary expansion to come. We're running a budget deficit, 10% of GDP. Government borrowing's the highest since it's been since the Second World War. We've seen sterling lose a third of its value, and we import huge amounts of goods in this country. Of course, they'll be more expensive with that sterling fall. Yeah. So even if we see 1 or 2 or 3 months of lower inflation from where we are going forward, as the base effects of oil at $147 last summer feed through, I think by the end of this year, we'll be looking at a problem that's about inflation, not deflation.
So we should be rushing out and buying inflation index gilts while they're still at relatively good prices.
I think there's something in that. I think what a lot of people, you see what's happening in the gold markets. People using gold as a hedge. You see people using land, timber, water and wood as a hedge. We're starting to see the basis of this now in the oil markets, with, again, despite newspapers around the Western world banging on about demand destruction, we're actually seeing futures markets pointing upwards strongly, ever more.
Hugh, this is somewhat at odds with your view this morning, isn't it? Let's bring you into the conversation around the desk. I mean, Liam's put out a case.
Yeah, sure, but I'm sure the viewers, if they've been watching the show on the loop now for a while, will have noticed something. That these guys keep coming on, and they keep saying the same thing. But they keep thinking it's a minority view, right? It is, Liam, you ain't a contrarian, right? It is not.
Well,
it is not. It is not.
With respect,
it is not a minority. It is not a minority. It is not a minority view. It is not a minority view to say you want to buy index-linked bonds. It is not a minority view to say that you believe there's going to be inflation and that you're shorting bonds. You are so consensual, yeah? Please do not. I mean, best of luck with that strategy, but don't perceive yourself to be contrarian. You're contrarian in the sense that you're going against a trend. That's all, right? Now, there are people, again, in the real world who are losing jobs, who are fearful that they're going to lose jobs. Marriages are breaking up. This is the greatest economic collapse.
You can be one example from history where quantitative easing has actually worked. You can be one example from history where higher inflation has helped jobs, has helped economic stability, has helped people make long-term investments. I'm not going to be told that I'm against people keeping their job because I've got 200 years of policy evidence on my side. This is a nuts policy. Everyone knows it's a nuts policy, but no one wants to talk about it because no one wants to be seen to be against people getting their jobs back.
But there's an old saying that says, the reality is no one really knows anything, right? Okay. But in the investment business, a lot of people who know absolutely nothing come on television and claim they know a lot, right? Now, the reality is quantitative easing does not work, okay? That's why we shouldn't be fearful of inflation, Liam. It doesn't work. We are in a sliding economy. Now, what is it sliding, right? We're talking about a nominal contraction in the British economy. The last time that happened then was 1949. So the notion that the government can sit idly by and do nothing.
And why is that happening? Why is that nominal contraction happening? Yeah. It's happening because the interbank market remains locked, because banks don't trust each other, because they're not being forced to clear out their balance sheets. We're not allowing weak banks to fail. It's as clear as the nose on my face and yours, Hugh. What good is quantitative easing going to do? It's just going to further wreck the macroeconomic context in which these hard, tough financial decisions have to take place. Creative destruction has to come through the banking system.
There's a huge gap between us, actually. The misinterpretation, I think, between us is we both agree. The misinterpretation between the two of us. I know that your head is firmly lodged somewhere, but the misinterpretation. The misinterpretation is that we believe that quantitative easing cannot succeed. Okay. Now, I then take it one step further and say you shouldn't worry about inflation. Okay, because if quantitative easing can't succeed in this environment, then it is profoundly deflationary. Okay. And that's why then I argue that if you can get 4% on a government British bond, then you should be embracing that as a safe and secure investment rather than speculating in gold or corporate bonds which have commercial risk. Yeah?
I fail to see how an enormous enormous increase in base money can be deflationary. I fail to see how massive gilt issuance, huge government borrowing generally, and a wildly expansionary monetary policy can be deflationary. It strikes me that I am pretty much the only national newspaper columnist here, and that's where the political consensus is made, I'm afraid, rather than the markets, who's been arguing this view.
Let's take a quick break. We're going to pay for the programming. Well, we still have people that are willing to pay for the programming. Liam, we'll be back with you in just a second. If you're happy to stay with us, we'll be happy to pick up the conversation. Squawkboxeurope@tnbc.com is our email address. We're going to take that break. We'll see you the other side of the commercials.
Through, not least, government borrowing.
Yeah, I just want to get one more in. I'm sure Hugh wants to come back as well. But let's say you're right and QE is a dismal failure, and we have got this huge inflationary argument, and that Hugh potentially is wrong, that we aren't suffering this longer-term deflation. It's quite easy, well, not quite easy, but it's easier to turn off the inflationary tap once we see it than turn off this deflationary problem that we've got at the moment. I mean, there are measures we can do. We can take that QE money out of the system. We can raise rates. We can do a lot of stuff to get rid of the inflation, can't we?
I know that's the line, but I fear for that policy. Once the inflationary toothpaste is back in the tube, it's very hard to get it back in. And is this really the best way to tackle the problem that we face? The problem that we face is an interbank market that's locked. So surely, to unlock that interbank market, we need to take the very difficult decisions here in the UK and the US. Shareholders who back bad banks that pursue wrong strategies, they need to be, they're going to lose their shirt, and so they should. I agree there's an argument about the bondholders in these banks, but they're going to need a haircut as well. In the end, you have to let these banks fail, because Japan didn't let those banks fail. You had a decade of zombie banks. We've created zombie banks in the US and zombie banks in the UK. Shareholders don't want to hear it, but at the moment, what's happening with the banking stocks is dragging down the whole of the rest of the economy.
I mean, Liam's got a loud voice. He's a kind of scary guy. I respect him.
Well, just tackle my arguments rather than insulting me. Why do you do that? You demean yourself, Hugh.
Because it's important. You're not a rational person. But I do actually. I applaud your spirit. I applaud.
Well, just tackle what I said.
I applaud where you are with the notion of we should be tackling the banks. I applaud your courage and your conviction to say that quantitative easing won't succeed. Where we differ is in an understanding of economics, because if you take on board everything that you say, and by and large I agree with everything that you say, you do end up rationally, in a rationally mannered mind, concluding that we are confronted with deflation.
Can I just add that this is a very interesting debate, and we've got viewers all over the world watching this debate. Pete in Seattle writes in.
Anywhere else.
Pete writes in from Seattle. I'm going to get a word in, Liam. Says, nights I spent as a cop arresting drunk drivers in Los Angeles were less contentious than this debate at the moment. Martin, you got some flashes.
Well, looks like since then you was right. He was saying we're going to have deflation, and he was right. Very interesting. I had lost this for a while when I love this little back and forth. I'm going to put it on my channel just to make sure it doesn't get lost. Bye-bye.